When my wife, Emma, mentioned the idea of a 2-week European tour with her childhood friends, I couldn't deny her the opportunity. After all, she worked tirelessly, balancing her job as an interior designer and her role as a mother to our 5-year-old daughter, Lily. She deserved a break, and honestly, I trusted her. We'd been married for 8 years, and our relationship, at least on the surface, seemed solid. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing to suggest anything sinister brewing beneath the surface. The morning she left, Emma kissed me on the cheek with a warmth that felt genuine. "Take care of Lily, okay?" she said, her green eyes sparkling with excitement about the adventure ahead. Lily waved from the breakfast table, her mouth full of cereal. "Bring me a snow globe," she managed to shout, and Emma laughed, promising to bring back a collection. Life felt routine after she left. Work kept me busy during the day, and in the evenings, I focused on being a dad. Emma's sporadic messages kept me updated on her adventures, visiting the Eiffel Tower, wandering through Italian vineyards, and exploring quaint German villages. Her photos showed her and her friends smiling, wine glasses in hand or posing in front of historic landmarks. Everything seemed fine until her texts started becoming distant. Around day 8 of her trip, I noticed her messages grew shorter, less enthusiastic. I chalked it up to her being tired or busy with activities. But then, she missed a video call with Lily. She'd never missed one before, no matter how hectic her schedule. I tried not to overthink it, convincing myself she was just caught up in the moment. But a nagging feeling lingered, like an itch I couldn't scratch. One evening, as I was tucking Lily into bed, I found myself scrolling through her recent posts on social media. Her latest update was a picture of her and her friends in Venice, the iconic canals in the background. They all looked radiant, yet something about her smile seemed off. Forced, maybe? I shrugged it off, deciding I was just being paranoid. The real alarm bells went off when I received a message from her best friend, Claire. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Emma's been acting a little strange lately. Maybe you should give her a call?" That's when my chest tightened. Claire wasn't one to meddle unnecessarily, and for her to reach out like this was unusual. I called Emma immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. My second attempt got the same result. I texted her, trying to sound casual. "Hey, hope everything's okay. Claire mentioned you seemed a bit off. Call me when you get a chance." Hours passed without a response. I didn't sleep that night, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The following day, Claire called me directly. Her tone was hesitant but concerned. "I don't want to cause any trouble, but Emma hasn't been herself. She's been spending a lot of time with this guy she met in Paris. I thought it was just friendly at first, but now I'm not so sure. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut." "A guy?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. "His name's Luca," Claire admitted. "He's handsome, charming. They met at some art gallery, and since then, they've been inseparable. I thought you should know." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My thoughts swirled with disbelief and anger. Emma? My Emma? I thanked Claire for telling me and ended the call. My hands shook as I stared at the phone, debating whether to confront Emma directly or wait for her to return. I decided to gather more information first. That evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I logged into her email account. She'd shared the password with me years ago when we were booking a vacation together, and she'd never changed it. My stomach churned with guilt, but my curiosity overpowered my conscience. What I found shattered me. There were emails from a man named Luca. The messages were flirtatious, even romantic. Phrases like, "Can't wait to see you again," and "Last night was unforgettable," jumped off the screen, burning into my memory. One email even mentioned plans to meet in Florence, plans she'd never mentioned to me. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. My mind reeled with questions. Was this just a fling? Or had our entire marriage been a lie? I needed answers, but more than that, I needed a plan. Emma was coming back in a few days, and I wasn't going to let her waltz back into our lives without confronting her. When she finally walked through the door, dragging her suitcase behind her, her face lit up when she saw Lily running toward her. But when her eyes met mine, the spark dimmed. She must have sensed that I knew. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. She nodded, her expression unreadable. That's when I noticed her hesitation. My heart raced with questions as I prepared myself for what was to come. Emma sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly together, her knuckles white. Lily had already been tucked into bed, her laughter and chatter replaced by an eerie silence that now hung between us. "What's going on, Emma?" I asked, my tone measured. I wanted answers, not an argument, not yet, at least. She hesitated, biting her lower lip. "It's not what you think," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then explain it to me," I demanded, leaning forward. "Explain the missed calls, the emails, and this guy, Luca." Her eyes widened at the mention of his name, and for a fleeting moment, I saw fear flash across her face. "How do you know about Luca?" she asked, her voice trembling. I folded my arms, refusing to answer. "That doesn't matter. What matters is what's been happening behind my back. I deserve the truth." Emma's shoulders sagged as if the weight of her secret had finally become unbearable. "We met in Paris," she admitted. "At an art gallery. He was charming, and I was lonely." "Lonely?" I repeated, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "How could you be lonely? You have a family who loves you. A husband who supports you." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not about love or support. It's about me. I've felt invisible, like I've been losing myself. I didn't plan for anything to happen with Luca. It just did." I wanted to scream, to tell her how selfish she sounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Did you sleep with him?" Her silence was answer enough. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. But I wasn't ready to let her off the hook. "And the emails?" I pressed. "Last night was unforgettable?" "What was that?" Emma's face crumpled as the tears finally spilled over. "I made a mistake," she sobbed. "It was one night." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice shaking. "Don't try to minimize this. One night or 1,000 nights, it's all the same. You broke my trust." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the gesture feeling like a betrayal of my own emotions. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know how to fix this." I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Neither do I," I said before walking out of the room. I needed space to think, to process everything I'd just learned. The next morning, Emma avoided me. She busied herself with Lily, pretending everything was fine. I watched her from the doorway, my thoughts swirling with confusion and anger. How could she act so normal after everything? Did she expect me to just forget? By evening, my anger had simmered into a cold resolve. I confronted her in the living room. "Emma, we're not doing this half-truth dance anymore. If there's more to this, you need to tell me now." She hesitated, her face pale. "There's more," she admitted. "But you need to give me time. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. I need to gather my thoughts." Her words, though frustrating, seemed genuine. I nodded sharply. "Fine. But tomorrow, there's no hiding anything. I want the full truth." That night, I lay awake in bed, questions swirling in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Emma was quieter than usual that morning, moving around the house like a ghost, her face pale and her demeanor subdued. I had spent the night replaying every conversation, every clue I might have missed. Trusting her to explain everything later felt like walking on a tightrope over a pit of secrets, unsure whether to catch her if she fell or let the rope snap entirely. Around noon, Emma came to me, her hands trembling as she held a cup of coffee. "David, there's something you need to know before tonight," she said softly. Her voice carried a weight that made my stomach churn. "Go on," I urged, unsure if I was ready to hear what she had to say. She sat down, placing the cup on the table. "When I was in Florence, something happened. I don't know how to explain it, but I made a mistake, David. A terrible mistake." I could feel my chest tightening as anger bubbled beneath the surface. "Another mistake? Or the same one that involves Luca?" I asked, my voice sharp. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "It's about Luca," she admitted. "And the consequences of what happened. David. I think I'm pregnant." The room seemed to tilt, the words hitting me like a physical blow. My mind raced with questions, accusations, and disbelief. "What?" I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded, her face a mask of shame. "I haven't taken a test yet, but I'm late. And with everything that happened, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you." I pushed back from the table, needing distance to process the bombshell she had just dropped. "So, let me get this straight," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You go on a 2-week trip, meet some guy, sleep with him, and now you're telling me you might be carrying his child? Is that about right?" Emma flinched at my words but didn't argue. "It's not that simple," she said. "There's more to the story, David. Luca, he wasn't who I thought he was." "Oh, spare me the details," I snapped. "What does it matter who he is? You betrayed me, Emma. You betrayed our family." Her tears flowed freely now, but I didn't care. I was too consumed by my own emotions to offer her any comfort. "I need time to think," I said finally, walking out of the room. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the one who had just shattered our lives. By the time evening came, I was no closer to finding clarity. I decided to confront her one last time, hoping for answers that might help me make sense of everything. When I returned to the living room, Emma was sitting on the couch, clutching a piece of paper in her hands. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "David, there's something else," she said, her voice trembling. "Something I didn't tell you earlier." I crossed my arms, bracing myself for another revelation. "What now?" She held out the paper, her hands shaking. "It's a letter from Luca. I found it in my suitcase when I unpacked. I didn't know how to tell you about it, but you need to read it." I took the letter, my heart pounding as I unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, almost mocking in its neatness. As I read the words, a chill ran down my spine. Emma. You've been a delight to know, and our time together will forever be a cherished memory. But you should know that I'm not a man who clings to the past. What happened in Florence stays in Florence. Do not try to contact me, it's better this way. Take care of yourself and the life you've chosen to return to. L. I stared at the letter, my mind racing. The words were cold, detached, and final. This man, Luca, had used her and discarded her like she was nothing. And now she was left to deal with the fallout, dragging me along for the ride. Is this the kind of man you risked everything for? I asked, my voice filled with bitterness. Emma's sobs were her only response. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt not just anger but pity. She had made her bed, and now we both had to lie in it. The question was, could our marriage survive it? Emma's sobs echoed faintly through the house long after I left her in the living room, clutching Luca's letter. My emotions were a tempest of anger, betrayal, and a sickening undercurrent of pity. I needed to clear my head, so I walked out onto the porch and sat in the cold evening air, letting the chill bite at my skin. The weight of Emma's confession pressed down on me like a physical burden. She might be pregnant, and the child might not even be mine. The idea twisted in my gut, but beyond the anger and hurt, there was a deeper fear. What would this mean for our family? For Lily? The night passed in a haze. I barely slept, my mind replaying every word she'd said. By morning, I was no closer to clarity, but I knew one thing: avoiding the conversation wouldn't solve anything. When I came downstairs, Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and her eyes puffy from crying. "We need to talk," I said, sitting across from her. My voice was firmer than I felt. She nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "David, I'm so sorry for everything I've done. I've hurt you in ways I can't take back, but I need you to understand why." "I don't need excuses," I replied sharply. "I need the truth. All of it. No more secrets." Emma took a shaky breath. "When I went on that trip, I didn't plan for any of this to happen. But, I felt like I was drowning here, David. Like I wasn't myself anymore. Luca was, he was exciting. He made me feel alive. I know that doesn't justify what I did, but it's the truth." Her words cut deep, but I forced myself to stay calm. "And now you might be pregnant with his child," I said. The bitterness in my tone was impossible to hide. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know, David. I'm scared. I haven't even taken a test yet. I didn't want to face it." "Then you need to face it now," I said. "We can't keep living in limbo. You need to know, and so do I." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Okay. I'll take one today." The rest of the day passed in agonizing silence. Emma avoided me, and I buried myself in busy work to keep from losing my mind. When evening came, she finally approached me, a small plastic stick trembling in her hand. Her face was unreadable. "David," she began, her voice breaking. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. "And is it mine?" I asked, my voice cold and flat. Emma's silence was answer enough. She crumpled onto the couch, her sobs racking her body. I stood frozen, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios, none of them offering any comfort. Finally, I spoke. "We're going to get a paternity test. We need to know for sure. Until then, I don't even know how to begin processing this." She nodded through her tears. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, David. I'll go to counseling. I'll give you space. Whatever you need." I wanted to believe her, but trust felt like a distant memory. "This isn't just about you and me, Emma. Lily deserves better than this. Whatever happens, we need to keep her out of it. She can't lose her family because of our mistakes." Emma nodded again, her tears slowing. "You're right. I'll do better. For her." The weight of the situation settled over us like a heavy blanket. The days ahead would be long and filled with uncertainty, but one thing was clear: our lives would never be the same. Whether or not our marriage could survive this remained to be seen, but for now, I could only focus on taking one step at a time. The next few weeks crawled by, each day heavier than the last. Emma scheduled the paternity test quickly, but waiting for the results was its own kind of torture. Lily, blissfully unaware of the chaos tearing through our lives, was the only bright spot in my days. Her laughter and curiosity were reminders of the life Emma and I had built together, even as it threatened to crumble beneath us. The tension between Emma and me was palpable, yet we tiptoed around each other like strangers. She tried to reach out, offering quiet apologies and half-hearted attempts at conversation, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. My anger hadn't abated, but more than that, I felt hollow. What was there to say? Every word felt inadequate in the face of her betrayal. The day the paternity test results arrived, Emma placed the envelope on the kitchen counter without a word. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my mind racing through every possibility. Finally, I tore it open, my hands trembling. The results were clear, the baby was mine. I should have felt relief, but instead, a wave of conflicting emotions crashed over me. The knowledge that this child was mine didn't erase the pain Emma had caused. It didn't undo the betrayal or the lies. All it did was add another layer of complexity to an already unbearable situation. Emma watched me carefully, her face a mix of hope and trepidation. "David," she began tentatively. "I know this doesn't fix everything, but—" "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "Just, stop. I can't do this right now." I left the house and drove aimlessly for hours, my thoughts a tangled mess. The reality of Emma's pregnancy, and my role in it, was impossible to ignore. This child didn't ask to be brought into our broken marriage, and Lily deserved stability, not parents at war. But could I truly forgive Emma? Could I move past the image of her with another man? When I returned home, Emma was sitting on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with tears. "David, please," she said softly. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me right now, or even anytime soon. I want us to find a way to move forward. For the kids. For us." I sat down across from her, my exhaustion weighing heavier than my anger. "I don't know how to move forward, Emma. I don't even know where to start." "We can start with counseling," she suggested. "I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I love you, David. I love our family." Her words stirred something in me, a faint glimmer of the love we once shared. But it was buried under layers of resentment and hurt. "If we do this," I said slowly, "it's going to take time. And it's not just about counseling. You need to show me that you're committed to fixing this, to fixing us." Emma nodded, her tears spilling over. "I will. I promise. Whatever it takes." The next few weeks were a cautious attempt at rebuilding. We started counseling, and while it was painful to relive the events that brought us to this point, it also forced us to confront the cracks in our marriage that had been growing for years. Emma was honest, brutally so, about her feelings of isolation and dissatisfaction, and I began to see my own role in her unhappiness. I'd been so focused on providing for our family that I'd neglected the emotional connection that once bound us together. But understanding didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't make the nights easier when I lay awake, haunted by images of Emma with Luca. Trust, I realized, would take a long time to rebuild, if it ever could. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Lily play in the yard, Emma turned to me. "David, there's something I've been meaning to tell you," she said cautiously. My stomach tightened. "What is it now?" She hesitated, then said, I reached out to Luca after I found out I was pregnant." My blood ran cold. "You did what?" "I needed to be sure," she said quickly. "I needed to know if he suspected anything, if he would try to insert himself into our lives. But he didn't care. He said he had no interest in the baby or in me. It was just a fling to him." Her words stung, even though I should have been relieved. "And you thought contacting him was a good idea?" I asked, my voice rising. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice trembling. "I was scared, David. Scared for us. I thought if I didn't confront him, he might show up someday and turn our lives upside down." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. The weight of her choices, and their consequences, pressed down on me like a physical burden. "You should have told me," I said finally. "We're supposed to be in this together now. No more secrets, remember?" Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I was just trying to protect us." I sighed, the anger draining out of me. "We'll deal with this. But you can't do things like this behind my back, Emma. If we're going to make this work, we have to be honest with each other. About everything." She nodded again, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I promise, David. No more secrets." The road ahead was uncertain, and the scars of Emma's betrayal would linger for a long time. But as I watched Lily run toward us, her laughter filling the air, I realized that some things were worth fighting for. Our marriage wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was ours. And for better or worse, we would face whatever came next together.